What does it take to become a member of Delta Force, the most elite unit in the U.S. military that captured Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro? Operations like this are carried out by those who have survived the most careful selection and rigorous training in the American military. The same unit captured Saddam Hussein in 2003, pulling him alive from a spider hole after months on the run. Delta Force was created in the 1970s when Colonel Charles Beckwith felt the U.S. lacked an elite counterterrorism force, a small surgical unit like Israel's Special Forces or Britain's Special Air Service. As the idea quietly became a reality, a U.S. Army Ranger named Eric L. Haney was approached to try out for the new unit. The pitch was simple: hard work, danger, no recognition. Everyone was relaxed during the tryouts, almost too relaxed. As Haney wrote in his memoir, Inside Delta Force, "The atmosphere of this place was so relaxed, I felt slightly uneasy. All could not be what it seemed." On paper, it looked like a fitness test, consisting of push-ups, sit-ups, an inverted crawl, a 2-mile run. In reality, it was designed to break people. Without rest, they went straight into the water in boots and full combat gear for a 100-meter swim. Haney knew the secret to swimming while weighted down was to relax and not hurry. As night fell, the candidates were sent on a long, solitary march, carrying a 40-pound pack for 18 miles. Anyone who quit had to say the words, "I voluntarily withdraw." A fellow ranger later said, "The pads of my feet stayed in my boots when I took them off after the march." Once the candidates were physically spent, their mental strength was tested. They had to answer the same questions over and over again, and exhaustion made it harder to lie. They answered questions like, "Do you have thoughts too terrible to speak about? Do you hear voices? Is your stool black and tarry?" That final question was designed to screen for ulcers or a drinking problem that could become a serious liability during a remote mission with no possibility of evacuation. Then came the stress phase. Deep in the mountains of North Carolina, candidates endured one of the most punishing phases of the test. They were sent out alone, navigating from point to point across remote, rugged terrain, carrying rucks that weighed more than 50 pounds. As the days dragged on, Haney realized the mountains weren't just testing their endurance, but their mind. The frustration and mental torture I had been suffering were completely of my own making, and completely within my power to disregard. Twisted ankles, skinned feet, and utter exhaustion became routine, all before a final 40-mile march through the mountains. It was the hardest thing they had ever done. Haney told himself, "All I can do is put one foot in front of the other. Left, right, left. If I can just keep taking one more step, then I can keep going." Once the ordeal was over, they were judged by their peers. They were asked to anonymously evaluate one another based on character, competence, and crucially, who they'd want beside them in combat. Delta Force operates in tiny teams, sometimes just a handful of soldiers. There's no room for weak links. They wanted people you could count on. A sergeant major told Haney that the other soldiers didn't respect him. "Haney, the peer reports of the other men indicated they don't think very highly of you. Said they thought you were a pretty poor example of a soldier." But Haney didn't flinch. He pushed back immediately. "Sergeant Major, that's crap, and you know it. You're just trying to rattle my cage. I'm the best soldier these men have ever met in their military lives." Then came the final psychological assault. One officer presented the following scenario. "Your commander has selected you to take out a terrorist who has been located in San Francisco. Due to the need for secrecy and the delicacy of the task, neither the local authorities nor the FBI can be made aware of the mission. You must eliminate the terrorist and then make your way undetected out of the city and back to Fort Bragg. You can leave no trace of evidence that would lead back to this unit. Tell me how you would accomplish the task." Haney talked about how he would fulfill the mission. Then the officer blurted, "You ignorant redneck. Don't you know it's against federal law for the military to be used for operations within the United States?" Haney's blood boiled, but he knew this was just a tactic to get under his skin. The goal was to attack each candidate personally to see who would lose emotional control. The officer continued, "You stupid Southern cracker. It's a good thing we have an army, so white trash like you can have a place to go rather than to the local chain gang where you would doubtless be otherwise." Haney said nothing. For 10 minutes, the officer tried to provoke a reaction, but when Haney remained silent, he was waved out of the room. The final decision rested with Colonel Beckwith, the founder of Delta Force, to determine if the candidate had the temperament to operate in the elite unit. When Colonel Beckwith began with, "Haney, I understand you don't like officers," Haney didn't hide what he believed. "That's correct, sir. I despise most of the officers I've ever met," explaining that most of the officers he'd met were focused on career progression. His refusal to flatter authority and his smart mouth actually worked in his favor. Instead of rejecting him, Colonel Beckwith welcomed him into Delta Force. Out of 163 soldiers who tried out, only 12 were chosen, a success rate of 7%. It was the highest in Delta Force history. Delta Force operators live a secret life, vanishing into classified personnel systems and living lives that don't officially exist. Training lasted 6 months, beginning with shooting drills. Hostage rescue became one of their core missions. Colonel Beckwith drilled one principle above all others: precision is everything. You must hit threats without harming hostages, and they trained for that scenario. Delta operators fired live rounds at a target while a teammate acted as a hostage just inches away. Delta also trained for one of the great nightmare scenarios of the 1970s: hijacked civilian airliners. Air hijackings were common at the time, and successful rescues were nearly non-existent except for a few notable exceptions. Delta studied these missions obsessively, learning what worked and what would not. Beyond weapons and tactics, a CIA field officer trained them in surveillance and tradecraft: how to move unnoticed, how to observe without being seen, how to know when you're being watched. Those same skills were applied in the real world as Delta Force monitored Maduro for months, tracking where he slept, what he ate, what he wore, and even the movement of his pets. Delta Force was also taught to target the right person because mistakes weren't embarrassing, they were deadly. After the 1972 Munich Olympics massacre, Mossad agents mistakenly killed an innocent Moroccan waiter, whom they misidentified as the mastermind of the attack, Ali Hassan Salameh. Through the 1980s and 90s, Delta operators were quietly present in nearly every major U.S. conflict: Panama, the Gulf War, Somalia, the counterterrorism campaigns that followed 9/11, and the capture of Saddam Hussein. Delta has become a permanent shadowed instrument of national power, which is why, decades later, when Nicolás Maduro became a target, the question was never who would be sent. There was never any doubt it would be a job for Delta Force. And in that daring raid, Delta faced heavy fire from armed guards and defenses, but no U.S. troops were seriously injured. Delta Force isn't just about physical strength, it's about making split-second decisions under extreme pressure. That kind of thinking isn't something you're born with, it's something you can train. That's why I love Brilliant. Brilliant helps you become a better thinker by solving problems hands-on in math, science, computer science, programming, and AI. You're not memorizing concepts, you're actively building intuition so everything finally makes sense. One of my favorites is Scientific Thinking, which trains you to tackle challenging puzzles like an engineer by testing ideas and making the smartest decision with the information you have. You can try Brilliant for free for 30 days by visiting brilliant.org/newsthink. The link is in the description, or by scanning the QR code on your screen. And if you sign up for an annual premium subscription, you'll also get 20% off, giving you unlimited access to Brilliant's thousands of interactive lessons. Thanks for watching. For Newsthink, I'm Cindy Pom.